Okay. Good morning. We're gonna read 10 minutes. We gotta hold on, Clyde. Now we gotta read for 10 minutes. And then I'll pet you. Then I'll pet you. Okay. So we're still reading from the book, Baron Trump Chronicles, and we're gonna start. Okay, so I'm starting on page 121. I found the leaves pungent and agreeable to the taste. Their effect was magical. My limbs at once forgot their numbness, and my step lost its heaviness. We had now been several hours in the great gloomy forest, and thus far Beniaga had advanced into its ever-increasing gloom, for night was falling without halt. Had Beniaga had as many eyes as Argus, and each of Link's power, he could not have pursued his way through Palanmatalin's gloomy corridors more easily and more securely. His polished wand flashed like a thing of life in his miraculously trained hand, touching everything, vibrating, swinging, advancing, retreating, with a rapidity that my eyes could not follow. "Oh, great master," I called out to him, "let me not be presumptuous enough to speak to thee of things which should be left unstirred in the chambers of thy mind. But if it be permitted to me to know, tell me how thy rayless eyes can pierce this gloom and find a path through this trackless forest, wrapped in the gloom and silence of 10,000 years." "It shall be as thou wishest, son," replied the blind hermit. "There is little to know thou shalt hear. But surely thy young limbs must be weary. First let me make ready a bed for the night and spread some food and drink." So saying, he swung his leathern bag off his shoulder, took it from a roll of dried skin, and spread it on the ground. Then, wrenching 4 pine boughs from a tree nearby, he thrust them in the earth, one at each corner of a square, and striking a spark with his tinderbox, set fire to the pitch which trickled down the boughs. The flickering flames cast 1,000 weird shadows on the trailing mosses and black-shrouded trees, and filled the air with a grateful warmth. Beniaga now drew forth some dried fruit and berries. We ate in silence. Bulger sniffed at the food, but nothing more. Our frugal repast concluded, the blind hermit took from his leathern pouch a sharp-pointed piece of flint, which he had pierced the bark of a tree near our bivouac. Into the hole he thrust a slender reed. I was astonished to see a limpid liquid flow from the end of the reed. He had filled a gourd with it, and placing the drinking vessel in my hand, said in a low, caressing voice, "Drink, my son, 'twill refresh and strengthen thee." I raised the gourd to my lips, and the liquid was cool and sweet, and very pleasing to the taste. "Drink as deep as thou wilt, my son," cried Beniaga, "for Palanmatalan could slack the thirst of any army." Again I placed the gourd to my lips. This time I drank long and deep. A gentle warmth now coursed through my limbs. My eyelids sank downward, oppressed with a most delicious longing for sleep. Pillowing my head on Beniaga's pouch, with my hand resting on my faithful Bulger's head, I was soon wrapped in slumber. When I awoke, it was still night. The pine knots had burned nearly out. There sat the blind hermit beside me. I could see that he was keeping watch. His head turned as I stirred. "Thou hast asked me," he began, "to tell thee how I am able to find my way through Palanmatalin's gloom. Here in this trackless home of shadow, no outward eyes alike. Here in this trackless home of shadow, no outward eyes would avail me aught. Thou hast seen how the floor of this vast temple is everywhere alike. For it, nature has woven a carpet of thick velvet moss, which in the flight of centuries takes on no change of hue. 'Tis ever the same. Tear a pathway in it, a few short days the rent will be made whole. Blaze the trees, the encircling mosses will, in brief period, hide the marks, and they all labor, and all thy labor will be in vain. Even supposing that thou couldst succeed in leaving a lasting trail behind thee, the deadly poison which lurks in this damp air would chill thy lifeblood ere thou couldst cross from outer wall to outer wall of this vast temple, with its roof of interwoven moss and foliage, impenetrable to the noonday sun. Thou hast felt the first touch of that deadly chill which curdles the warmest blood and sends a sleep of death upon the rash intruder. But to me, O my son, Palin Matalin is a light and a glow. I cannot see that gloom which strikes such terror to thy soul. And thou must know, my son, that Palin Matalin has no shadows deep enough to hide the North Star from my sight. I always know which way the sun went down and which way it will be that he will rise. For all the winds are known to me, and whence they blow. To thy cheek the air appears to sleep at times, to mine never. 'Tis no more a task for me to catch the breath like zephyr, unfelt by thee, than it is for thy faithful dog to take up on the trail of his master's footsteps, and follow it through the crowded mart. Then again thou must bear in mind that for 100 years and more I've been the shadowless figure in this home of shadows, that the trees of Palamutalin have taken me to their hearts and them to mine, that not only do I know how and where they grow, but it hath been revealed to me that these towering children of Palamutalin are not scattered helter-skelter here and there in orderless manner, but that in a certain measure they are arranged in lines from the rising toward the setting sun, which species forming a belt to itself, not like a grove by man's hand. Thou hast seen how the trunks are swathed up in garbs of moss, and how the gloom gives all the foliage the same deep dark hue of green. To thine eye, here, all these trees seem alike, the countless offspring of a single sire, and yet it is not so, for when, in my progress through these lofty corridors of gloom and silence, I sway too far northward or southward, a single handful of leaves crushed in my grasp gives up the secret of my whereabouts. But when this sure guiding string has failed me at times, and I have gone astray in the home of my friend, and yet in such moments Palan Matalin had no terrors for me. When thus an aimless wanderer in this trackless wood, I learned to draw aside this garb of green which decks Palan Matalin's breast, and lay my hand upon its very heart. So has kind nature sharpened my sense of feeling, that by the simple touch of clay beneath our feet I can set my erring footstep right and regain my lost path. Be thou, my son, in coming years, as steadfast in thy search for truth as I have been in my endeavors to change this gloom and silence, into living light and speech, and that will walk through life's devious paths as easily as I thread my way through the trackless chambers of Palan Matalin. As Beniaga ceased speaking, he lifted his song, making the trailing mosses sway with vigor of his notes, now deep and solemn, now clear and far-reaching. The echoes came back softened down to flute notes. He listened breathlessly. Oh, wonderful man, thought I, even the sleeping echoes rouse themselves to guide thy footsteps aright. Come, my son, he cried in tones of gladness, our torches go to their end. Let us push on. Though the sun may not be yet high enough to chase the inky darkness out of Palan Matalin's depths, still, with this guiding string thou canst follow me. Saying this, he placed the end of a leather thong in my hand, and we set out once more. After we had been an hour or so underway, the sun's rays began so to temper the darkness of the great gloomy forest that my eyes were of some slight use to me. Again, Beniaga broke out in a wild chant and paused to catch the echo. Ah, murmured the blind hermit, half in soliloquy. That was a greeting from the drowsy waters of Lulpatul. Imagine the feeling of utter helplessness which came over me an hour or so later when suddenly I found myself standing upon the banks of a broad streamlet of hue blacker than the wings of night, apparently stagnant, or at least so sluggish as to seem well deserving of the little drowsy waters, of the title Drowsy Waters. Man, that 10 minutes just went by fast, like it was exactly 10 minutes. Okay, well, today's short and sweet, my friends. Okay, we're going to start over tomorrow. At the top there. So we started with page, I think it was 120. I think so. Page 121. Okay. See you tomorrow. Today's better.